The acid rain hammered against the reinforced dome of Outpost 217 like thousands of angry fists. Marcus Chen stood at the observation window, watching the caustic droplets create shifting patterns in the purple-tinged atmosphere of Kepler 371 bits. 3 years into his contract as lead terraforming engineer, he'd grown accustomed to the planet's hostile weather, but something about tonight's storm felt different. The outpost's sensors screamed to life, cutting through his contemplation. A breach in the northern perimeter shield. Something had penetrated the outer defense grid. Marcus grabbed his environment suit from the ready rack, muscle memory taking over as he sealed each connection. Whatever had broken through wasn't following any known wildlife patterns. "Computer, status report on breach location," he commanded, checking the charge on his plasma cutter. The tool doubled as a weapon in emergencies, though he'd never needed it for more than clearing fallen vegetation. Unknown object detected in Zone 7. Biological signatures present, but inconsistent with known database entries. Caution advised. Marcus squared his shoulders. As the only crew member awake during this phase of the terraforming cycle, the responsibility fell solely on him. The rest of the team would remain in cryo for another 2 months, conserving resources while the initial atmospheric processors did their work. The airlock cycled, and Marcus stepped into the corrosive downpour. His suit's exterior immediately began to smoke as the acid rain attacked the protective coating. He had 20 minutes before he'd need to return for decontamination. The breach location was only 5 minutes away. Plenty of time to investigate and return. His helmet lights cut through the purple haze, illuminating the twisted forms of native vegetation. The terraforming process had already begun to alter the ecosystem, creating hybrid species that could survive in both the original atmosphere and the oxygen-rich environment they were building. These botanical chimeras served as a bridge between two worlds. The tracking signal led him to a crater in the perimeter shield's energy field. Something had crashed through it with enough force to temporarily disrupt the protective barrier. As he approached, his suit's sensors detected a heat signature, faint but steady. What he found stopped him in his tracks. Curled in the crater's center lay a humanoid figure, its skin seeming to shift between translucent and opaque like liquid glass. The being was clearly female, with features that seemed almost human yet undeniably alien. Her body was wrapped in what appeared to be a technological suit of some kind, now badly damaged and sparking. Marcus approached cautiously, his training warring with his instincts. Standard protocol dictated immediate quarantine of any unknown biological entity. But as he watched, the acid rain began to eat away at her protective covering. Without intervention, she would die in minutes. The alien's eyes snapped open, all 3 of them. They were deep violet, with pupils that spiraled like galaxies. She tried to move but collapsed, a sound like crystal wind chimes emanating from her throat. Marcus made his decision. "I'm going to help you," he said, knowing she probably couldn't understand. He removed his auxiliary oxygen pack and attached it to her suit's breathing apparatus. To his surprise, it connected perfectly, as if their technology had been designed to be compatible. Her body relaxed slightly as fresh oxygen flowed into her system. Marcus activated his emergency beacon and lifted her as gently as he could. She weighed almost nothing, her body seeming to shift and adjust to his grip like liquid finding its level. The return trip to the outpost was a race against time. His suit's integrity was failing faster than expected, and the alien's condition appeared to be deteriorating. As they reached the airlock, he noticed something extraordinary. Where the acid rain had eaten through her protective covering, her skin had begun to develop a crystalline shell, as if adapting in real time to the hostile environment. Inside the decontamination chamber, Marcus laid her on the emergency medical bed. The outpost's AI began scanning her immediately, trying to make sense of her bizarre biology. Her 3 eyes followed his movements as he worked to stabilize her condition, their spiral pupils dilating and contracting in an almost hypnotic pattern. "Can you understand me?" he asked, removing his helmet. The alien lifted a hand. her fingers elongating impossibly to touch the glass barrier between them. Where her skin contacted the surface, complex patterns spread like frost on a window, forming what appeared to be mathematical equations. Marcus stared in amazement. She wasn't just trying to communicate. She was teaching him how to communicate with her. The equations described a basic universal language based on physics constants. Within hours, they might be able to have a rudimentary conversation. As he began to decode the patterns, Marcus realized that this encounter would change everything. The terraforming project, his contract, the future of human-alien relations, none of it would ever be the same. And somehow, watching the mysterious being before him continue to adapt and survive against all odds, he knew that change might be exactly what humanity needed. In the medical bay's soft light, the alien's crystalline skin refracted colors he'd never seen before, creating patterns that seemed to tell stories of distant stars. For the first time since arriving on this hostile world, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. The universal language of mathematics proved to be just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Marcus learned that his visitor called herself Astra, though this was merely the closest approximation her name could take in human speech. Her true name was expressed through a complex pattern of crystalline resonances that made the air itself shimmer. In the quarantine bay, transformed into a makeshift technobiology lab, Marcus watched in fascination as Astra's crystalline biology revealed its secrets. Her people, the Lumini, existed in a state of constant adaptation. Their bodies could alter their molecular structure in response to environmental changes, forming complex crystalline matrices that could process almost any form of energy. Your world, Astra communicated through the mathematical interface they'd developed. It sings with potential. Her three eyes spiraled in what Marcus had come to recognize as excitement. But your methods of terraforming are incomplete. Marcus leaned forward, intrigued. Incomplete how? Astra pressed her hand against the transparent barrier between them. Where her fingers touched, complex molecular diagrams began to form. You change the air, the soil, force life to adapt or die. But there is another way, a harmony that can be achieved. She showed him how her people had learned to terraform worlds by working with existing ecosystems rather than overriding them. The crystalline structures in her biology weren't just for adaptation. They were living computers, capable of processing and directing environmental changes at the molecular level. As the days passed, their conversations grew deeper, moving beyond mere scientific exchange. Marcus found himself sharing stories of Earth, of the overcrowded megacities he'd left behind, of his dreams of building new worlds. Astra, in turn, revealed more about her own past. I was a resonance architect, she explained, her skin shifting through patterns that expressed complex emotions. My role was to help design new colonial harmonies, ways for our people to exist in balance with different environments. But I questioned our methods, suggested changes to our traditional approaches. Her spiral pupils contracted with what Marcus now recognized as pain. In my society, such questioning is seen as disharmonious. I was given a choice: conform or be sent on a deep space research mission. I chose the latter, but my ship was damaged in an ionic storm. The crash landing here was unplanned. Marcus felt a surge of anger at the thought of a society that would exile someone for asking questions, for seeking better ways. He'd left Earth to escape rigid thinking, to find new possibilities among the stars. In Astra, he recognized a kindred spirit. Their work together began to yield extraordinary results. Astra's understanding of crystalline structures led to breakthroughs in the terraforming process. By introducing engineered crystal formations into the soil, they could catalyze environmental changes that would have taken decades to achieve through conventional methods. But it wasn't just the scientific collaboration that was evolving. Marcus found himself increasingly drawn to the way Astra perceived the world. She experienced reality as an interconnected symphony of energy and matter, seeing patterns and possibilities that human senses couldn't detect. Through their mathematical language, she tried to share these perceptions with him. One evening, As they worked late in the lab, Astra's crystalline form began to glow with an inner light. "I want to show you something," she said through their interface, "but you must trust me completely." She placed her hand against the quarantine barrier, and this time, instead of equations or diagrams, the surface began to crystallize entirely. The transformation spread rapidly, creating a structure that bridged the space between them. Before Marcus could react, the barrier between them had become a crystalline membrane, simultaneously solid and permeable. "Your safety protocols are still in effect," Astra assured him, noting his concern. "But now I can share with you how I see your world." As she reached through the transformed barrier, her crystalline fingers touched his forehead. Suddenly, Marcus's perception exploded into new dimensions. He saw the energy flows within the outpost's walls, the complex dance of molecules in the air, the subtle resonances that connected all matter. Most extraordinarily, he saw Astra as she truly was, a being of living light and crystal, her consciousness expressed through intricate patterns of energy that made his breath catch in wonder. The experience lasted only moments, but it changed everything. As his normal perception returned, Marcus knew he could never see the world the same way again. The barriers between them, physical, biological, cultural, seemed insignificant compared to the profound connection they just shared. But their growing closeness didn't go unnoticed. The outpost's AI had been dutifully recording everything, preparing reports for the next data burst to Earth. Soon, others would know about Astra, about the changes they were making to the terraforming project, about the possibilities their partnership represented. As Marcus watched Astra return the quarantine barrier to its original state, her crystalline form still glowing softly in the dim light, he realized they were standing at a threshold. Whatever came next would reshape not just their lives, but potentially the future of both their species. The question was, were they ready for what that future might bring? The awakening of the rest of the terraforming crew was less dramatic than Marcus had anticipated. Perhaps it was Astra's ethereal beauty, or the undeniable success of their modified terraforming protocols, but the initial shock quickly gave way to cautious curiosity. Dr. Sarah Wong, the team's xenobiologist, was particularly enthusiastic, spending hours documenting Astra's unique biology. "It's remarkable," Sarah explained during one of their daily briefings. "Her crystalline structure doesn't just adapt to environments, it remembers them. Each adaptation becomes part of a growing library of survival strategies." She projected a hologram showing the complex latticework of Astra's cellular structure. "In a way, she's carrying the knowledge of every world her species has encountered." Marcus watched Astra interact with the crew, her crystalline form shifting subtly to put each person at ease. She had an innate ability to read emotional energies, adjusting her own resonance patterns to create harmony. Even Chief Security Officer Richards, initially the most suspicious, had begun to soften after Astra helped stabilize a critical malfunction in the atmospheric processors. Their breakthrough came during the third month of collaboration. Astra had proposed integrating crystalline seed structures into the terraforming process, creating what she called harmonic anchors that would guide the planet's transformation. The theory was sound, but the implementation required a delicate touch. The crystals must grow in response to the planet's own rhythms. Astra explained, her three eyes spinning in complex patterns as she directed the seeding process. "Force them, and they become brittle. Guide them, and they become strong." Marcus stood with her at the observation dome, watching as the first test area began to transform. The purple haze of the toxic atmosphere seemed to shimmer and dance around the planted crystal formations, where before the acid rain had scored the landscape bare. Now it was feeding the growth of hybrid structures, part crystal, part organic matter. "It's like watching evolution in fast forward," Sarah whispered, her scientific detachment momentarily forgotten in wonder. The success of the test zone led to rapid expansion of the program. Within weeks, the crystalline networks had spread across vast stretches of the planet's surface, creating protected zones where Earth plants could grow alongside native species. The hostile world was becoming a garden, but not through conquest, through cooperation. But their progress attracted attention. The first warning came in the form of an official inquiry from Earth Command, demanding detailed reports on the unauthorized modifications to the terraforming protocols. Then came the order to suspend all crystal seeding operations pending review. "They're afraid," Astra observed, her form dimming slightly as she processed the news. "Fear of the unknown is a resonance I feel in many humans, but not in you, Marcus." Her middle eye fixed on him with an intensity that made his heart race. "I learned to see beauty in difference," he replied, remembering their shared vision weeks ago. "You taught me that." Their connection had deepened beyond words or mathematical equations. Marcus found himself attuned to Astra's crystalline frequencies, able to sense her moods through subtle changes in her light patterns. In turn, she had begun to understand human emotions with remarkable precision, often anticipating needs before they were expressed. The crew noticed, of course. Some, like Sarah, watched their growing closeness with scientific fascination. Others, particularly Richards, seemed troubled by the implications. The ancient question of whether two such different beings could truly understand each other, let alone care for each other, hung unspoken in the air. Everything changed the day Astra discovered she could sing to the crystals. It happened during a routine maintenance check of the harmonic anchors. She had been examining a cluster of newly formed structures when she emitted a series of crystalline tones that made the air itself seem to vibrate. The crystals responded, their patterns shifting and flowing like liquid light. "The planet," she explained, her voice filled with wonder, "it remembers. The crystals we've planted carry echoes of both our worlds now. They're creating something entirely new." Marcus watched in amazement as the crystal cluster began to produce structures unlike anything they'd seen before. Not purely lumini, not Earth-based, but a perfect fusion of both. The new formations possessed properties that defied their understanding, simultaneously organic and crystalline, adaptive yet stable. But their triumph was short-lived. That evening, the outpost's long-range sensors detected multiple ships entering the system. The energy signatures matched no known human vessels. "They found me," Astra said, her form pulsing with anxiety. "The Harmony Council. They must have detected the crystal networks." Marcus felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He had known this moment might come, but facing it was another matter entirely. The choice between duty and love, between protocol and protecting someone who had become more precious to him than his own world, loomed before him. As alarms began to sound throughout the outpost, Marcus looked at Astra, her crystalline form now barely containing the turmoil within. Whatever came next, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not let anyone take her away, not after everything they had built together. The seeds of understanding they had planted would either bloom into something beautiful or be crushed by the weight of two civilizations' fears, and time was running out to determine which it would be. The Lumini ships descended through Kepler 371 Bits' atmosphere like falling stars, their crystalline hulls refracting the purple light into cascading rainbows. Marcus stood with Astra in the outpost's command center, watching as the vessels arranged themselves in a perfect geometric pattern above their location. 7 ships, Astra whispered, her form flickering with anxiety. They sent a full Harmonic Council delegation. They mean to make an example of this. The first transmission came as a burst of crystalline frequencies that made every window in the outpost resonate. Astra translated, her voice trembling. "They demand my immediate surrender and the destruction of all modified terraforming structures. They say," she paused, her 3 eyes spiraling tightly, "they say I have corrupted the natural order by merging our technologies." Marcus felt the crew's eyes on him. As station commander, his next decision would determine not just Astra's fate, but potentially the future of human-Lumini relations. Chief Richards already had his security team on standby, while Dr. Wong clutched her tablet containing months of invaluable research data. "Open a channel," Marcus commanded. his voice steady despite the tension knotting his stomach. "Let's show them what we've actually created here." The main screen flickered to life, revealing a panel of Lumini elders. Their crystalline forms were rigid, geometric, lacking the fluid grace that made Astra so captivating. Their triple eyes fixed on Marcus with cold calculation. "I am Resonance Master Vix," the central figure announced, their words translated through Astra's interface. "You harbor a disharmonious element. Surrender her, and we may overlook your species' involvement in this aberration." Marcus stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Astra. "With respect, Resonance Master, I suggest you look more closely at what your disharmonious element has achieved." He nodded to Dr. Wong, who began transmitting data from their terraforming project. Images filled the screen. Crystalline forests supporting both Earth and native species, atmospheric readings showing unprecedented stability, energy efficiency metrics that exceeded both human and Lumini standards. "This isn't corruption," Marcus continued, gaining confidence. "It's evolution. Astra hasn't destroyed harmony. She's discovered a new form of it." The Lumini Council stirred, their forms shifting slightly as they processed the information. But Vix remained unmoved. "Our ways have preserved our civilization for millennia. Change brings chaos. The exile must be returned for reconditioning." "No." The word came from an unexpected source. Chief Richard stepped forward, his security team moving to flank the command center's exits. "This outpost is under Earth jurisdiction. Ms. Astra has been granted provisional protective status under Section 7 of the Colonial Charter." Marcus turned in surprise. Richards gave him a slight nod. "Already filed the paperwork, sir. Turns out our guest's contributions to the project make her an invaluable scientific asset. Legally, they can't touch her without going through Earth Command." A dangerous light pulsed through the Lumini ships. "You would risk interstellar conflict to protect one disharmonious element." Vix's tone carried a clear threat. "We would risk it to protect the truth," Marcus replied. He reached back, taking Astra's hand. Where their fingers intertwined, light and crystal merged in a display of impossible beauty. "Look at your scans again. The crystal networks we've grown here aren't just terraforming tools. They're a bridge between our species, proof that harmony doesn't mean uniformity." Astra stepped forward, her form blazing with newfound courage. "I choose to stand with them, Resonance Master. Not in defiance of our ways, but in expansion of them. The first resonance teaches that true harmony embraces all frequencies, even those we don't yet understand." The tension in the command center was palpable as the Lumini Council conferred in frequencies too high for human ears to detect. Finally, Vix spoke again, their tone carrying a hint of something new. "Uncertainty. You speak of the first resonance," they said slowly. "Yet you encourage disharmony." "I encourage growth," Astra countered. "The very crystals we use for terraforming prove my point. They adapt, they change, they become stronger through integration. Are we not meant to learn from the structures we revere?" A murmur went through the council. Marcus held his breath, feeling the weight of the moment. Everything they'd built together hung in the balance. Their work, their discoveries, their love that defied the boundaries between species. Then, almost imperceptibly, the geometric pattern of the Lumini ships began to shift. The aggressive formation softened, becoming more organic, more reminiscent of the hybrid crystals growing on the planet below. "Perhaps," Vix said finally, "there is wisdom in examining these new frequencies. We will observe your work here. If the harmony you claim exists can be verified, the Council may need to reconsider certain traditions." It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was a beginning. As the transmission ended, and the Lumini ships moved to establish orbit rather than attack positions, Marcus felt Astra's form relax beside him. The immediate crisis had passed, but they both knew the real work was just beginning. "Thank you," Astra whispered, her words meant for everyone in the command center, "for choosing to stand with me." Marcus smiled, watching the play of light through her crystalline form. Some choices, he said softly, make themselves. Around them, the hybrid crystal forests continued to grow, reaching toward the stars with branches that were neither fully Earth nor fully Lumini, but something gloriously, impossibly new. 6 months after the Lumini Council's arrival, Kepler 371 bits had become something unprecedented in the history of both species. The planet, once hostile and barren, now bloomed with hybrid life forms that defied categorization. Crystal-encoded plants stretched towards the twin suns, their structures simultaneously organic and crystalline, while the atmosphere had stabilized into a perfect balance of Earth and Lumini conditions. In the expanded outpost, now serving as an interspecies research center, Marcus stood beside Astra as they presented their latest findings to a mixed audience of human and Lumini scientists. The former quarantine bay had been transformed into a sophisticated laboratory where Dr. Wong worked alongside Lumini resonance experts, studying the incredible adaptations taking place on the planet's surface. The hybrid crystals aren't just terraforming tools anymore, Astra explained, her form shimmering with excitement. They're becoming a new form of life entirely. Watch this. She touched a nearby crystal formation, sending a gentle resonance through its structure. The crystal responded by producing a series of complex patterns that rippled outward, influencing the growth of nearby organisms. It's a completely new form of evolution, Marcus added, watching the amazed expressions of their audience. The crystals adapt not just to survive, but to help other life forms thrive alongside them. They're creating bridges between different types of biology. Even Resonance Master Vix, who had chosen to remain as the Council's permanent observer, showed signs of being impressed. Their formerly rigid crystalline structure had begun to display more fluid patterns, influenced by prolonged exposure to the hybrid environment. But the most remarkable discovery had come through Dr. Wong's latest research. She had been studying the subtle changes in both human and Lumini biology caused by prolonged exposure to the hybrid crystal environment. The results were astonishing. The crystals are acting as a biological translator, she explained, displaying complex molecular diagrams. They're creating a kind of bridge between our different forms of life. In theory, given enough time and the right conditions, they could enable compatibility. The implications of her words hung in the air. Marcus felt Astra's form pulse with emotion beside him, her 3 eyes spinning in complex patterns that reflected both hope and uncertainty. The possibility that their 2 species might someday be able to truly unite, to create life together, had seemed impossible just months ago. Later that evening, as the binary stars set in a spectacular display of crystal refracted light, Marcus and Astra stood in their private garden. The space was filled with hybrid crystal plants of their own design, each one representing a different moment in their journey together. "Did you ever imagine," Astra asked, her form glowing softly in the twilight, "when you found me in that crater, that we'd end up here?" Marcus smiled, reaching out to touch one of the crystal formations. It responded to his presence now, just as it did to Astra's, their months of working together having left their mark on both their biologies. "I imagine my ancestors never imagined they'd reach the stars," he replied. "Yet here we are." The question of their future together no longer seemed impossible, just challenging. The hybrid crystals had shown them that barriers between species could be bridged, that love could find ways to express itself even across the vast differences between stars. A sudden chime from the outpost communication system interrupted their moment. Dr. Wong's excited voice came through. "Marcus, Astra, you need to see this. The latest crystal formation. It's doing something new." They hurried to the lab, where a crowd had already gathered. In the center of the room, a new type of crystal structure was growing, its pattern unlike anything they'd seen before. It pulsed with a combination of human DNA sequences and Lumini resonance patterns, creating something entirely new. "It's beautiful," Astra whispered, her form synchronizing unconsciously with the crystal's rhythm. Marcus watched in amazement as the structure continued to grow, its pattern suggesting possibilities that neither of their species had dreamed of before. As the crystal reached toward the ceiling, its light casting rainbow patterns across the assembled faces of humans and Lumini alike, Marcus realized they were witnessing more than just a scientific breakthrough. They were seeing the future, a future where love could transcend the boundaries of biology, where different species could come together to create something greater than the sum of their parts. The Lumini Council had already begun to reform their ancient laws, influenced by the undeniable success of their experiment. Earth's scientific community was buzzing with the implications of their discoveries. But for Marcus and Astra, standing together in the glow of their impossible garden, the most important change was much simpler. They had found a way to build a home among the stars, not just for themselves, but for all who would follow in their footsteps. As night fell on their transformed world, the hybrid crystals sang their ethereal song to the stars, telling a story of two beings from different worlds who dared to imagine a new kind of harmony. And in that song was the promise of countless new beginnings, waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to reach across the void between stars and say, "I choose this. I choose us." The end.